One of the most amazing aspects of Hindu polytheism is just how complicated and complex it is. To give you some idea of that, this is the Kasi Vishwanathar temple in Tamil Nadu, India, which is in the southeastern corner across from Sri Lanka. And this is typical of southern Indian temple facades. It is extremely complex. If you get into detail, which I will in a minute, you'll see there are many, many different manifestations and incarnations of different gods, male gods, female gods. The overall temple is dedicated to Shiva, the god of destruction. But really, if you look at it carefully, you'll see, again, another example of one here. The same thing. You'll see spirits like the one at the top, sort of devil figures. You'll see incarnations of particular gods and goddesses. You'll see animals. You'll see myths being told. So the entire myth of the Ramayana, parts of it will be here. The story of Rama and Sita, and Rama was a manifestation, an avatar of Vishnu. And so what you're seeing is, well, how come in a temple dedicated to Shiva, you also have sculptures and dedications to Vishnu? And the answer is neti neti. Hinduism doesn't look at things just one way. There are going to be mixtures of many, many different gods and goddesses and traditions all in one temple. And you'll see this in the center part of the temple as well. There will be, even though it's a shrine primarily to Shiva, and he will be manifested in many different ways, from simple stones all the way up to huge sculptures. You'll see many, many different manifestations of Shiva. You'll see Ganesh, another form of Shiva, an elephant form. You'll also see temples to Vishnu in the Shiva temple. So it's very, very complicated and very, very overlapping. So again, here's the Madurai temple dedicated to Parvati, who is a consort of Shiva. So this is, again, another Shiva temple, but a subset of a Shiva temple to, when I say consort, it's basically his female side kick, like his wife, basically. But she has different powers and different energies that she brings. So if you look at this, you'll see not only the variety, and if you look at the blue figures, if you look at the lower left, you'll see one there that usually is symbolic of some aspect of Vishnu. The blue is typical of water, and water is a form that Vishnu takes. So again, very colorful, very dynamic, chaotic as far as we're concerned. Which god are you supposed to be worshiping? How do you know? It's both beautiful, but also very complicated. So if you look at this again, you'll see, again, pictures of the holy bulls and the cows that are sacred in India, also usually signs of Shiva. You'll see, again, everything from symbolic, you see those spirals, which are symbols of infinity, over on the right side, up on towards the roof line. You see all kinds of different things that are symbolizing the complexity of the God form. And that is, again, a very distinctive aspect of Hinduism. So if you look a little bit more closely, on the left-hand side, this is a local myth. This is a myth about Vishnu coming to save parts of southern India. You can see him there in blue, but he's not in God form. He's in human form, so he's in avatar form there. You can see symbols of women on the right side. In many Hindu temples, you'll actually see gods in sexual positions and orientations, and that's both to teach young people what they should be doing, but it also is to show that the gods engage in the same sorts of behaviors that humans do. And that's interesting. So there's both a human element to this and a superhuman element to it, either in the form of heroes or in the forms of gods themselves. So what's the closest thing you can think of to this form of the divine in the Western context? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. And if you think about it, it's the cathedral. The cathedral, if you look at cathedrals from a more objective standpoint, if you step outside of the Catholic context, you'll say, well, it seems like they're worshiping a lot of different gods here. You have the apostles, you have the saints. You can see here the apostles and the saints on either side of the door. You have incredible complexity of all of the different aspects of the type of curriculum that you have in the Catholic Church. Many cases, you get to the Annunciation, the conception of Jesus, the nativity, the birth of Jesus, oftentimes pictures of Jesus at different parts of his life, and you say, well, that doesn't represent a different God, but it's similar to what you see in the Hindu version of things. The other thing that this is similar to is the rose windows. If you look at rose windows, frequently these depict the Last Judgment, or they depict the saints, and they are both highly colorful and highly complex. So it appears as if Christianity is much more polytheistic, at least in what's being worshipped, than the ideology would suggest. So all I'm suggesting here is that Hinduism has embraced this idea of the multiplicity of the God form more than any other religion that we're going to study. So let's break this down a little bit and get to the Trimurti and the foundation of the Trimurti. The fundamental triangular foundation on which all of the Hindu gods rest is on these three forms: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Now, each one of them represents a different aspect of the natural form. So Brahma is the earth, Vishnu is water, Shiva is fire. So basic elements. They also represent aspects of the circular process of creation and destruction. So Brahma is the creative force, Vishnu is the preserving force, and Shiva is the destructive force. And as you know, in any natural system, you have to have destruction in order for creation to begin again. If you think about anything like a forest fire destroys the forest, but it creates new soil for new things to grow. And so then Brahma comes in and creates, Vishnu preserves. Vishnu is sort of the source of, you can almost look at this seasonally. If Brahma is the early spring, Vishnu is the summer, Shiva is the fall and winter. So again, seasonal cycles in this as well. You don't have that in India to the same extent, but it's that same idea of circularity of existence. So in the creation, there's abundance. There's also morality in the creation. So Brahma has a kind of a moral element to his existence. The preserving element is the slowing down of decay, but it's also about prosperity. Vishnu is very much about overseeing your ability to make money, the ability to have your children be healthy, those sorts of things. And Shiva is celebrated not only for the destruction of the natural cycle of things, but also the need for us to destroy certain negative parts of ourselves. So it's a little bit like looking at Shiva as a necessary form of destruction. So if you think about the parts of yourself that maybe it's an anxiety or depression or perfectionism, those sorts of things, Shiva is there to help you fight that war against the demons that are inside of you. So the Shiva Nataraja, we'll talk more about this, the dancing Shiva becomes kind of an elemental form of Shiva. But you notice here Shiva is being depicted almost in a female form. So the gods become kind of neti themselves in their own gender distinctions. Oftentimes it's hard to tell whether Shiva is male or female, and that's on purpose because the Hindus look at this sort of non-duality. If you want to see the more explicit elements, not trying to embarrass you here, but when I told you that there were sexual elements of this, you will never see this in a Christian church. You will never see this in any other form of religion. But again, you see human beings and gods interacting sexually. And this is actually a temple in the northern part of India where newlyweds and people who are about to get married go, essentially, this is their form of sex education. And so you get your sex education in the church, or the temple, I should say, but you get it through your religion. And I think that's an interesting element as well. So we'll move away from that to avoid further embarrassment. But it's interesting that we talk about sex and embarrassment. That's a very Western conception. This idea of sinfulness in sex does not exist in Hinduism. In fact, it's the opposite. Right? That's the creative force. And the creative force is something that should be worshipped. And since sexuality is part of human nature, it's part of the creation, why shouldn't it be celebrated? If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So that gives you a basic overview of the aspects of divinity in Hinduism. And I'm going to elaborate in a separate video on the Trimurti and the forms of the Trimurti. But hopefully you get some idea of how complicated this is. It begins with a simple triangle, and we end with something that looks more like this, which is not only can't be reduced to 3 things, you can't even be reduced to 100 things. It's just very, very complex. And that's, depending on how you look at it, either a strength or a weakness in the religion. So we'll move on with other aspects of the Trimurti in a separate video.